The story begins weeks earlier in Hong Kong, where a shipping container full of illegal immigrants is being prepared for transport to Bundong, South Korea. A manager inspects the people packed tightly inside the dark container. Someone suddenly starts coughing violently in the cramped space. Despite this concerning sign, the manager gives the all-clear signal anyway. The container is sealed shut and dispatched on its long journey across the sea to South Korea. Meanwhile, in the city of Bundong, a woman named Dr. Kim In-hae is involved in a serious car accident. Her vehicle has crashed and fallen into a deep construction hole. The car is stuck in such a dangerous position that any wrong movement could cause it to plunge even deeper. In no time, the rescue squad arrives at the scene to help. However, the situation is extremely precarious. The space is so tight that only one person can safely go down at a time. A firefighter named Kang Ji-gu volunteers and takes the initiative. He carefully makes his way down into the hole, moving slowly and cautiously. Despite the dangerous conditions, Ji-gu uses all his experience and training to eventually rescue Dr. Kim successfully. He brings her out safely from the wreckage. After the rescue operation is complete, Ji-gu approaches Kim and tries to start a friendly conversation with her. But she simply ignores him completely and leaves in the ambulance without saying a word. That night, Kim calls Ji-gu and asks to meet at the same spot where the accident happened. Ji-gu gets excited, believing that Kim has called him to appreciate his rescue efforts and thank him properly. However, when he reaches the location, he becomes disappointed to discover she simply called him to retrieve her bag that was left behind in the hole. He initially refuses, claiming it's against their protocol to go back down. But after Kim leaves, he changes his mind. He enters the hole again with the help of one of his colleagues and retrieves the bag for her. After bringing it up, he searches through the bag and finds an identity card showing that Kim is a doctor. Just then, the phone inside the bag starts ringing. Ji-gu hesitantly answers it. Kim's young daughter Mi-ru is on the other side. After a brief chat, Ji-gu agrees to meet her outside her school to return the bag. Meanwhile, two brothers named Byung-ki and Byung-woo approach the shipping container that arrived from Hong Kong. When they open the heavy metal doors, they are completely taken aback by what they find inside. Everyone is gone. All the immigrants who were packed inside are now lifeless bodies. All except for one person. There's also an extremely powerful and disgusting stench coming from inside the container that makes them cover their noses. Confused about what to do with this horrific discovery, the brothers take videos of the scene on their phones. They decide to put the lone survivor inside their truck to help him. After driving for a while, they stop at a grocery store. Byung-ki heads inside to buy some supplies. Sensing the opportunity while he's alone, the survivor makes a desperate run for it and escapes from the truck. When Byung-ki returns from the store carrying bags, he notices immediately that the man has escaped. He also sees that his brother Byung-woo is coughing heavily and looks unwell. He tries chasing after the survivor but ultimately gives up. Instead, he decides to take his sick brother to a medical clinic right away. Tell me the time and country you're watching from. At the clinic, the doctor examines Byung-woo and gives him some normal prescriptions, asking him to rest at home. But Byung-woo cannot stop coughing at all. Without realizing it, he spreads his infected droplets to all the people sitting near him in the waiting room. Meanwhile, Ji-gu visits Mi-ru outside her school as promised. He tries to start a friendly conversation with the young girl, but just like her mother, Mi-ru refuses to interact with him. She simply takes her mother's bag and Ji-gu's business card before walking away without saying much. As Ji-gu heads home that evening, he notices some people on a nearby bus coughing very heavily and looking sick. Following this, we see a montage showing how the mysterious virus is slowly but steadily taking over the entire city of Bundong. More and more people start showing symptoms. Later, when Kim reaches home, she becomes extremely happy to find that her bag has been returned safely. She hugs her daughter Mi-ru with pure joy and also thanks Ji-gu silently in her heart for his help. Just as the mother and daughter are enjoying this bonding moment together, Kim receives an urgent call from her hospital. They inform her there's been a sudden medical emergency involving a very strange case. She needs to come immediately. Left with no other options, Kim leaves Mi-ru in the care of her grandmother and rushes to the hospital. When Kim arrives at the hospital, she immediately notices that everyone looks scared and tense. The atmosphere is different from normal. She heads straight into the emergency room where the patient Byung-woo is lying in critical condition. He has coughed up massive amounts of blood and his entire body is covered with red rashes. Kim quickly deduces from the symptoms that this is avian flu and immediately tells her senior doctors about her concerns. But they're not fully convinced by her diagnosis. Soon after, the medical staff gets hold of Byung-woo's phone and discovers the disturbing footage of the container filled with dead bodies. They become certain that the virus must have originated from that container. They approach the patient's brother Byung-ki to ask him questions about it, but he remains completely silent and won't answer. Suddenly, an emergency alarm starts blaring loudly throughout the hospital. This sound makes Byung-ki extremely anxious and worried. Despite all the doctor's warnings and attempts to stop him, he wrestles everyone aside and rushes desperately into the emergency room. He finds that his brother Byung-woo has already passed away. Completely devastated by grief, he breaks down crying and hugs his brother's body tightly. This causes his hands to get completely stained with his brother's infected blood. In his emotional state, Byung-ki then touches several of the doctors and nurses with his contaminated hands before they finally manage to subdue him and hold him back. In the next scene, Mi-ru gets bored staying at home and ventures outside alone without permission. She's almost hit by a vehicle in the street, but the survivor from the container named Moon-sai suddenly appears and saves her just in time. Mi-ru notices that he looks very hungry and weak. Being a kind child, she provides him with some food to eat. As they talk, Moon-sai warns the little girl seriously to stay away from him because he's sick and doesn't want to infect her. But Mi-ru continues talking to him anyway, not understanding the danger. A while later, Moon-sai starts coughing violently. This prompts Mi-ru to call Ji-gu for help using his business card. But by the time Ji-gu arrives at the location, Moon-sai has already disappeared into the city. By this time, thousands of people throughout Bundong have become infected by the rapidly spreading virus. This results in all the hospitals becoming completely overcrowded with sick and dying patients. The medical system is being overwhelmed. On the other hand, Kim works together with a team from the KCDC, the Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They manage to locate the shipping container and decide to incinerate all the dead bodies inside to prevent further spread. However, a large swarm of rats that had been feeding on the infected corpses manages to escape into the city before the container is burned, potentially spreading the virus even further. Meanwhile, a special medical team consisting of top doctors from around the entire country holds an emergency meeting to discuss the crisis. After a long and heated conversation, the team reaches a terrifying conclusion. The deadly virus is a modified version of the H5N1 strain, which is extremely dangerous. It can take down its victims within just 36 hours of infection. They urgently instruct the government officials to quarantine the entire city immediately. If they don't act fast, the virus may spread to the whole country and eventually even the entire world. Elsewhere, Ji-gu has taken Mi-ru to a large supermarket. There they sit down to have lunch together and start bonding while sharing some of their personal secrets with each other. After a while, as they prepare to leave the mall, complete chaos suddenly begins to unfold around them. People start coughing up blood violently and falling unconscious right where they stand. Some of them even pass away on the spot in front of everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. Ji-gu notices a woman about to fall from the escalator and immediately rushes to save her. But in the process of rescuing the woman, he loses sight of Mi-ru in the growing chaos. Back at the emergency government meeting, the doctors and politicians get into a serious argument. Some of the politicians deem the citywide quarantine completely unnecessary and too extreme. They're probably more worried about the economic impact than people's lives. During this heated discussion, a series of massive accidents occur outside in the streets. A gas station explodes in a huge fireball. This results in mass casualties as vehicles crash into each other. Now the virus is spreading at such an incredibly rapid rate that hospitals and all communication systems have become completely overwhelmed. The government has no choice. The quarantine is forcefully initiated across the entire city. Fearing for their own lives, the politicians and many of the doctors decide to fly to Seoul and continue their research there in safety. As the medical researchers plan to evacuate, Dr. Kim informs her colleagues that she will join them later. First, she needs to find her daughter who's still missing. She calls Mi-ru's phone, but Ji-gu is the one who picks up. He quickly briefs her about the terrible situation unfolding inside the supermarket. Wasting no time at all, Kim rushes to the location. She's devastated to find that her daughter is nowhere in sight. Soon the situation gets completely out of control. People start looting the stores and fighting violently against each other for supplies. As a result, the army is deployed to restore order. A huge brawl breaks out between soldiers and civilians. Kim and Ji-gu desperately search for the little girl amid all the chaos and violence. After what feels like forever, they finally manage to find Mi-ru hiding. The three of them rush out of the supermarket just before the security shutter is permanently closed and locked by soldiers. Once they're safely outside, Kim requests that Ji-gu leave the city along with them on the evacuation flight. But he firmly refuses, claiming that it's his duty as a firefighter to stay and help the people who need him. He then hands her his car keys and sends them away to safety. After they leave, Ji-gu teams up with one of his colleagues. Together they work to release all the people who got trapped inside the supermarket when the shutter came down. Meanwhile, Kim and her daughter successfully reach the airport and pass through the initial security checks. But just as they're about to board the final helicopter to Seoul, Miru suddenly starts coughing. As a result of showing symptoms, they are immediately denied entry onto the aircraft by security personnel. That night, the Korean Army teams up with US forces and the KCDC to reinforce a strict lockdown throughout the entire city. All the residents are forcefully relocated to a massive quarantine camp. At an emergency meeting in Seoul, the politicians team up with national and international physicians. They come to a decision that all citizens will be tested. Then they'll be segregated into two groups, infected or uninfected. One of the physicians strongly argues that mixing these two groups of people will result in an even bigger spread of the virus. But the politicians tell the doctors to remain silent and follow orders. Their plan is simple: release the ones who don't show any symptoms of infection. The infected will supposedly be treated in a separate medical ward. Meanwhile, at the quarantine camp, Kim arrives with her daughter and is shocked by the terrible state of the place. People barely have any space to move around, let alone live comfortably. They're packed together like animals. Some of them are already coughing up blood while others live in constant fear that they'll be infected next. Later, while Kim is gently tying her daughter's hair, she notices red rashes appearing on Miru's neck. This is one of the main symptoms of the virus. Despite knowing this terrifying truth, she takes Miru through the medical examination room without saying anything and into the main quarantine camp area, hiding her daughter's infection. The next morning, on direct orders from the government, soldiers gather on rooftops throughout the city. They begin shooting at all the birds flying overhead. The government fears the birds will transmit the virus to other countries if they migrate. Down in the camp, the survivor Moon Sai is finally discovered and captured by the authorities. After carefully examining him, the doctors are absolutely taken aback to discover something incredible. He has somehow completely overcome the virus and developed a natural immunity to it. They immediately call Dr. Kim to start working on creating an antibody. She's the only doctor in the entire camp who has extensive knowledge about this particular virus. A few hours later, Kim successfully manages to extract the antibody from Moon Sai's blood. However, when she presents the idea of injecting the antibodies directly into an infected patient to test it, her senior doctors immediately reject the suggestion. They say it's too dangerous and untested. Later that same day, while Kim is secretly trying to smuggle her sick daughter out of the camp, a couple of quarantine staff members arrive. They're trying to locate Miru using her tag number 2066. They mention that her test results came back positive for the virus, so they're there to take her to the infected zone. Kim is absolutely devastated that she's going to be separated from her daughter. But just then, Ji-gu suddenly steps forward bravely. He introduces himself as number 2066 instead. With this lie, the guards take him away to the infected zone. Later, one of Ji-gu's firefighter friends spots him in the wrong area and cleverly uses his own identification card to get Ji-gu out of there before anyone notices the mistake. Meanwhile, Kim enters the special tent where Moon Sai is being held under guard. Even though the higher authorities specifically instructed her against it, she decides to proceed anyway. She uses the untested antibody directly on Miru, who has now become extremely sick and weak. Kim starts a careful blood transfusion between her daughter and Moon Sai, hoping desperately that it will work. But a few moments later, the security troops notice what she's doing and barge inside the tent. They immediately put Kim to sleep with sedatives and take the infected Miru away from her. Let me know in the comments which pandemic movie I should cover next. In the next scene, Ji-gu witnesses guards transporting what appears to be a child's body wrapped in plastic toward the contaminated disposal zone. He assumes in horror that it might be Miru. He immediately pursues the men carrying the body and discovers Miru's distinctive headband lying on the ground along the way. This confirms his worst fears. Soon after, he reaches a location where thousands of infected corpses are being methodically wrapped up in plastic sheets. Some of the people aren't even fully gone yet, they're still moving, still breathing, but being wrapped anyway. As Ji-gu continues desperately searching for Miru, he comes across an absolutely horrific sight that will haunt him forever. A massive crane is grabbing entire piles of bodies, dozens at a time, and dumping them into a stadium that has now been converted into a giant incineration pit. Fearing the absolute worst, he immediately climbs down into the pit itself. As huge flames begin consuming the bodies all around him, Ji-gu suddenly hears a familiar ringtone. He realizes it belongs to Miru's phone. He rushes frantically toward the sound, digging through wrapped corpses. He finally discovers the little girl wrapped tightly in plastic, still barely alive. He rips away the plastic and pulls her out just seconds before she would have been consumed by the massive flames. Meanwhile, the tension inside the main quarantine camp has reached a dangerous boiling point. When a military officer uses force to stop an infected soldier, the action goes too far. The angry crowd goes absolutely wild and erupts out of the camp in a violent rush. On their way out, They witness Ji-gu heroically saving Mi-ru from the burning pile of bodies. They quickly deduce that the government has been incinerating infected people while they're still alive. Because of this public outburst and riot, the medical personnel make a quick decision. They decide to immediately leave the dangerous area and continue their research on Monsai and Seoul where it's safer. The officials ask Kim to come with them for her expertise. But she firmly refuses, saying she absolutely has to find her daughter first. As the medical team is preparing to leave in their vehicle, Byung-ki suddenly appears. He's been consumed by grief and rage over his brother's death. He notices Monsai in the vehicle and rushes forward, fatally stabbing him multiple times as revenge for bringing the virus that ended his brother's life. At the same time, Kim is desperately searching everywhere around the camp for her daughter but fails to find her anywhere. With a heavy heart, she reluctantly agrees to leave with the medical staff, still hoping to find Mi-ru later. Back in Seoul, the president witnesses the city of Bundong descending into complete chaos and pandemonium on live news feeds. He's under enormous pressure from a UN representative named Schneider to take extreme action. Schneider demands they eliminate all the infected people immediately so they don't cross the border into other areas. Despite this intense pressure, the president orders the army to stand down and hold their fire until an antibody can be successfully created. Schneider and the vice president are extremely unhappy with this decision. They think it's too soft and dangerous. But they reluctantly agree to wait for the antibody to be developed. Unfortunately, things take a terrible turn for the worse. Monsai passes away in the ambulance from his stab wounds before reaching the hospital. With his death, all their hopes of developing an antibody also disappear completely. When the vice president learns of Monsai's death, he makes a decision without telling the president. He secretly instructs the army to use force to stop the outraged civilians from reaching the Seoul border at any cost. A violent shootout begins. While several civilians fall during the chaos, Ji-gu somehow manages to escape the area. He's still carrying Mi-ru, who by this time has started to feel noticeably better. She's even able to speak clearly now, which strongly suggests that the antibody Kim gave her actually worked. Elsewhere, Kim rushes desperately to meet her daughter at the border. But she's immediately stopped by heavily armed soldiers who won't let anyone through. She repeatedly tries to explain that her daughter has been cured and might have the antibody everyone needs. One of the soldiers finally decides to take her to their command base so she can communicate directly with the president about this crucial information. Back on the chaotic street, a man overhears Ji-gu mentioning that Mi-ru has the antibody in her blood. Seeing an opportunity, he secretly follows them. When the girl is briefly alone, he grabs her and drags her to an isolated room. He tries forcefully to extract her blood with a syringe, planning to use it for himself or sell it. Fortunately, Ji-gu arrives just in time with his friend. The three men engage in a brutal fight. At last, Ji-gu manages to stop the attacker permanently. However, his best friend is severely injured during the violent struggle and can't continue. Meanwhile, Kim finally gets through to the president on a secure communication line. She informs him urgently that her daughter has been completely cured of the virus. Mi-ru may have the antibody they desperately need to save everyone. Hearing this potentially life-saving news, the president immediately orders his soldiers to hold their fire and stop shooting at civilians. But Schneider, the UN representative, isn't convinced at all. He doesn't trust this information. He tells the military commanders to keep shooting regardless of the president's orders. After a tense few minutes, Kim finally reaches the border checkpoint area. When she sees Mi-ru among the crowd of infected people trying to cross, she runs directly toward her daughter without any hesitation. Unfortunately, as she tries to pull Mi-ru over the containment line to safety, a gunshot rings out. Kim is shot in the arm as per the orders given by Schneider, who wants to maintain the quarantine at all costs. But before the soldiers can fire again and cause more harm, little Mi-ru does something incredibly brave. She shields her mother with her small body and repeatedly tells the armed men not to shoot. She keeps saying, "Please don't hurt my mother," over and over. This simple act of love and courage deeply touches the hearts of everyone watching, including the hardened soldiers. They all lower their weapons and step back, unable to fire on a child protecting her mother. Even the infected people in the crowd feel renewed hope and motivation from witnessing this scene. They start running together toward the border, no longer afraid. On the other hand, when Schneider sees the soldiers refusing to follow his orders and shoot, he completely loses control. He goes ahead and calls in a military airstrike to bomb the entire area and end the problem permanently. This extreme action enrages the president beyond belief. He immediately orders his own military forces to shoot down any fighter planes if they dare to enter Bundong airspace. The two leaders get into an intense heated confrontation over the communication channels. But at last, Schneider reluctantly backs down when he realizes the Korean president won't compromise on protecting his own people. After the immediate danger is finally averted, the president goes live on national television. He announces to the entire country that he will find a cure no matter what it takes. He promises to do absolutely everything in his power to save his people from this terrible virus. In the final scene, Mi-ru is carefully transported to Seoul under heavy medical supervision. Doctors there will use her blood to create a vaccine that can save everyone. Meanwhile, Kim and Ji-gu make the difficult decision to stay behind in Bundong to help the people who remain. The movie ends with a news reporter announcing incredible news. The vaccine has been successfully created and tested. The people of Bundong will be among the very first ones to receive it and finally be saved from this nightmare. Hope has returned at last.